Jo Karen Hudson. I'm going to work with you today on section 15.4, the quadratic formula. The solutions to the quadratic equation in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers, and a is not equal to 0, are given by this formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There was a mistake in the book originally. Make sure that you have an X after that B there. And if there's not an X after the B, would like for you to change it. So let's start with the first example. Solve the following quadratic equations. Now in this first example, A is 1. It's the coefficient of the squared term. B is negative 1. It's the coefficient of the x term. And C is negative 6. It's the constant. Now, there is a little song that we can teach you to help you remember this quadratic formula, and it goes like this. It's to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so maybe you might want to practice that to help yourself remember the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b. That means the opposite of b. So we're going to have 1 plus or minus the square root of x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now if b is negative 1 and we square it, we'll get positive 1 minus 4 times whatever a is, and a is 1, times whatever c is, and c is negative 6, all over 2 times a, and a is 1. So we'll have x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 1. Now I have negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4 times negative 6, which is positive 24 over 2. Now, cleaning this up, I'll have x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 24, which is 25 over 2. And the square root of 25, that's a perfect square. It'll break right down for us. So we're going to have x is equal to 1 plus or minus 5 over 2. So I'm going to separate that. X is equal to 1 plus 5 over 2, and x is equal to 1 minus 5 over 2. So now I will have x is equal to 6 over 2. Positive 1 and negative 5 is negative 4 over 2. So my final answer would be x is equal to 3, comma, negative 2. And this is the way you will type the answer in the computer, 3, comma, negative 2. Example 2. 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 is equal to 0. We have 0 on one side already, so we don't have to make any changes there. A is 2, B is negative 5, and C is negative 3. So we have x is equal to the opposite of b, which would be positive 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Let's see, if b is negative 5 and we square it, we'll have negative 5 times negative 5 would be positive 25, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 3, all over 2 times a, which is 2. So now we'll have x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. Negative 4 times 2 would be negative 8. And negative 8 times negative 3 would be plus 24 over 4. So now we have x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 4. So we have x is equal to, and we know that the square root of 49 is equal to 7, so we'll have 5 plus or minus 7 over 4. So now we have x is equal to 5 plus 7 over 4, and 5 minus 7 over 4. So we have x is equal to 12 over 4, and positive 5 and negative 7 would be negative 2 over 4. So we have x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 1/2. Now the answers will be typed into the computer as 3 comma negative 1/2. Ask your instructor for the quad program. This program can be used to solve any quadratic equations or to check any quadratic equations. Now on example 3, I think I'll go ahead and distribute that one out before I get 0 over on the right side, so that I'll have 2x times x is 2x squared, 2x times 4 is 8x is equal to negative 3, and then I'm going to add the 3 to both sides, and I'll have 2x squared plus 8x plus 3 is equal to 0. So I will be ready to name my A, B, and C. So A is 2, B is 8, and C is 3. So I'll have x is equal to the opposite of b, which would make it negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which would be, let's see, 8 times 8, which would be 64, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times 2, or x is equal to negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 64 minus, see, 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24 over 4. So now we'll have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 24 would be 40 over 4. Now I'm looking at 40 and thinking about perfect squares. 1 squared, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 16. I believe I can use 4. So I have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 10 over 4. Or I have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus 2 square roots of 10 over 4. Now if you'll notice there, you can divide all three of those terms by 2, so I want to go ahead and do that before I separate them. Or you can do them after you separate them if you forget. X is equal to negative 4 plus or minus, these 2's will cancel, I'll have the square root of 10 over 2. So my answers written separately will be negative 4 plus the square root of 10 over 2, comma, negative 4 minus the square root of 10 over 2. These are the two answers that should be typed in the computer with commas in between. Example 4, again, I do not have 0 on the right side right here. I do not have 0, so I'm going to have to add 1 to both sides so that that will turn into a 0. 3x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. So now I'm ready for A, B, and C. And A is 3, and B is negative 2, and C is 1. So I'll have x is equal to the opposite of b, which would be positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, and negative 2 times negative 2 would be positive 4, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times 3, 2a. So x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus, let's see, 4 times 3 is 12 times 1 is 12, so it will be 4 minus 12 over 6. And that's going to be negative. X is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of positive 4 and negative 12 would be negative 8 over 6. Now notice that negative under the radical. The square root of negative 8 is equal to the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 8, or we could rewrite that as I square roots of 8. So I have x is equal to 2 plus or minus I square roots of 8 over 6. And now that square root of 8 has a perfect square in it. Thinking of the perfect squares, 1 squared, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. 4 is the one that I need. So I have x is equal to 2 plus or minus I. The square root of 8 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 2 over 6. So I have x is equal to 2 plus or minus. Now the square root of 4 becomes 2, so I'm going to write that as 2i square roots of 2 over 6. Now all of those are divisible by 2. All three of those terms are divisible by 2. I'm dividing everything in the numerator and everything in the denominator by 2, so that I will have x is equal to 1 plus or minus, these 2's cancel, I square roots of 2 over 3. I'm going to move this other down. Just a minute, I'll be back. All right, I'll have x is equal to 1 plus I square roots of 2 over 3 and 1 minus I square roots of 2 over 3. That is the answer you will find that you need to type into the calculator. Going on to the last example, example 5. Example 5 has 5x squared minus 25x, so a is 5 and b is negative 25, and there is no constant, so you'll have to list c as 0. So we have x is equal to the opposite of b, which would be positive 25, plus or minus the square root of, let's see, negative 25 times negative 25 would give us positive 625, minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is 0. And when we multiply by 0, that whole part turns into 0. And this is going to be over 2a, or 2 times 5. So now we'll have x is equal to 25 plus or minus the square root of 625. Remember, this whole portion turned into 0 over 10. So now we have x is equal to 25 plus or minus the square root of 25, which is 25, over 10. So when we split it, we'll have x is equal to 25 plus 25 over 10, and we'll have x is equal to 25 minus 25 over 10. So we'll have x is equal to 50 over 10 and 0 over 10, or we'll have x is equal to 5 and 0. And those are the two answers that you will type into the calculator, 5, 0. This is section 15.4. You will need to do the homework on section 15.4 as well as the quiz on section 15.4. This is Jo Karen Hudson. Thank you and have a wonderful day.